Hello adventurers! Welcome to another Engrimoore tutorial. I am your humble host, Virgil the Magnificent. And today we are going to be going over the denking system as well as a little bit of information on encounter channels, traveling through the wilds, etc, etc. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing to go over is that there is a travel system implemented into our server to increase immersion as well as for ease of use for our players. So we have a travel command, and essentially what that does is you see me scrolling here on the left side. There's a ton of channels, and some of these are OOC channels, but like all of these are RP channels. And this is just for one kingdom. Right? One kingdom's territory. So knowing that there are at least 3 other kingdoms in the world, you can see that once and you can see little references here, don't look too hard. You can see that there's a lot of channels, and there's going to be more. We're constantly adding to the world, so there's a ton of channels in here. So as a player coming in here for the first time and then being bombarded with, 500 channels can be very overwhelming. It's hard to navigate. So in order to mitigate that, we've implemented the travel system. With that, essentially when you put the travel command into a specific channel, like this one that I have open here, where it tells you that this is a travel channel, and all travel channels in their pins will have this blurb if you can run the command there, they allow you to segment your experience. So you only ever see the zone inside of the world that your character is currently in. This also allows us to better track where your character is for things like weather and other sorts of, dynamic events like that. After all that preamble, how does the travel system work? Essentially, if you are in a travel channel, like this one, you can go into, and since this is a thread, a forum channel, you would go into a specific thread here. So let's take this one for instance, and you would simply input travel/travel and enter, and then it will give you the options of where you can travel to. So you either have Terraris City or East Terraris Wilds. We want, for the purposes of this video, to go into the East Terraris Wilds, so we do this. And of course, since I am a mod, I see all channels all the time, so this doesn't really change anything visibility-wise, but needless to say, all of these channels would disappear from your view as a player, and then you would only see this section, the West Wild section. Or actually, I'm sorry, I'm in the East Wilds. Incorrect, the East Wild section. The next piece of information that you'll need to keep in your head at all times, at least for the foreseeable future, is that traveling between wild channels like these that are tagged as wild channels, and encounter channels as well. So there's a difference between wild channels and encounter channels. Both follow the same rules. But to travel from one encounter channel or wild channel to another, an hour in-game passes. So that's something to keep in mind for, any duration abilities like Mage Armor or summons that have limited durations, any effects that are currently on your character that have specific durations. Once you pass from the Mondale Farms to the South Elderwood, for instance, an hour goes by, so those timers get knocked down by an hour. That also means, however, that you can indeed short rest in between these channels if you have a short rest available. That's just basics. There's a few other rules in there that you can go over in the rules channel, as is linked here. There's a couple of little details in there, but that is the broad spectrum. This is what you need to know. The next thing that you need to know in entering into encounter channels, and you will see the difference between a wild channel and an encounter channel shortly. So if you go to the South Elderwood, you will actually see the blurb for dynamic encounter in its pinned thread. If you see a channel that has this language in here, anything like this tag of dynamic encounter, what that means is that the minute you enter into this channel, you are required to run a dynamic encounter before you can continue on either forwards or backwards. So if you are moving to the South Elderwood from the Mondale Farms, dynamic encounter if you want to go to the Witchwood Grove, and dynamic encounter if you decide to go back to the Mondale Farms. In order to leave this channel, a dynamic encounter must be relevant. The other thing to keep in mind when going through an encounter or wild channel is to consider whether or not they have safe roads in that channel. If they do, this little blurb and tag will show up in the embed. What that means is that essentially there are two different types of dynamic encounters that you can run should roads be available. Wild encounters are generally more dangerous. They tend to roll higher level creatures. However, because they are more likely to be more difficult, that also means that the loot rewards for them are greater. When it comes to roads, if you're just looking to quickly traverse through an area and not get into too much trouble, and you're not concerned about gaining too much in the way of loot, you can run a roads encounter. They are generally safer, easier to manage, and of course, because of that, have less loot gain potential. Okay, so that's enough talking about all of the things surrounding dynamic encounters. Let's actually show off how you do one. So when I first enter into this encounter channel, wild channel, I must run / and you can do Denc for dynamic encounter. It's our abbreviation for that. Now this will give you the option either way in the command string to generate either a road or an encounter channel. However, the bot does know whether or not roads are available in a channel. So I'm pretty sure that the server hasn't done enough of what they need to do to get safe roads into the Viridian Glade yet. So I'm going to try and run a road one and see if it tells me that I can't do it. And I was right. This channel doesn't have roads. So I am not able to run a road encounter there, but I can run a wild. So once you are partied up, the bot knows, based off of who is in your party, whether they be PCs or sidekicks or uncontrolled mounts, how to balance the encounter for the current party. So even though I'm by myself, the bot will know to generate a wild encounter balanced for my current party, which is just me. Now, what you are going to see is, since I'm in a party by myself, you are only going to see what it looks like for the party leader. So from the party leader's position, you will actually get this readout, and you can see that this is an ephemeral message that you can dismiss. I would advise not doing that. And we actually rolled within 30 feet. So the way that this works is that if you roll an encounter, because the distance is random, if you roll an encounter within 30 feet, none of the stealth mechanics, which I will showcase in a minute by running another encounter, will generate. This, however, down here is what the party sees. The rest of the party only sees this blurb, but we can only start the encounter. So this will print out the command for the party leader to run. You do this, everybody joins initiative, you do the fight. Now, as you can see here, you have a few options. After you have resolved this fight, you can click the Get Rewards button, and the rewards will automatically be rolled and added to everybody in the party's inventory. If you satisfy the flee rules that are in our system, you can then hit the forfeit button. And then you have the skip button, which is grayed out right now, and the reason that it's grayed out is because we have not satisfied what is required to skip. So let me just go ahead and hit forfeit for now so we can see if we can roll something that is beyond 30 feet. Well, okay, I was looking for an encounter that was beyond 30 feet, but this is a great example of another type of encounter. So you have combat encounters, which show up in red and have this symbol here. And then you have RP encounters, is generally what we call them. So these are random and specific to the environment. They can show up instead of a fight. So they will have their different scenarios that the party needs to overcome in order to continue forward. You still need to resolve these, whatever they may be, before you can move forward or backward. The other thing to note that came up in the last one as well, in all of these blurbs, is it will tell you what weather conditions and lighting conditions are in play currently for this encounter. So the party leader and the party themselves can better manage, any sort of check alterations or visibility problems, anything like that, based off of the current weather. It prints it out right there for you without you needing to check it. So since that was an RP encounter, we're going to try again. Let's hope that it does it right this time. Finally! Okay, so you can see here as the party leader, I can see this message, and the message that the party sees is now different, and that is because the enemy that was rolled is beyond 30 feet. This engages our stealth sort of visibility encounter mechanic before a Denc is initiated, or before combat is initiated, really. So the first thing you need to do is party passive perception versus monster passive stealth. So what this readout means for the party leader is that you need to take everybody's passive perception, which is an easy way of being able to see their passives is if everybody in the party does this command. So the party leader will know, because they can see the monster. The rest of the party can't see this monster, so they will look up the monster stat block. They will compare the monster's passive stealth, which is 10 plus whatever. And by lowest, what it means is sometimes there's a mix of different monsters. You take the monster with the lowest stealth bonus and do 10 plus that bonus. That gives you their passive stealth. And essentially what you do is as long as one member of the party's passive perception beats the lowest monster's passive stealth, the party passes. And then it just asks you, does the party pass? Only the party leader can click this button, pass, fail. So for this instance, let's just say we pass, because we do. And then monster. Then the reverse happens. Monster passive perception versus party's passive stealth. So what this essentially means is the reverse. The lowest party member's passive stealth needs to meet or beat the monster with the highest passive perception, and then it's a question of, did the monsters pass? Now, I'm just going to show you. I didn't look up this monster's abilities, but let's just assume for the sake of argument that the monster's passive perception does not beat my passive stealth, so the monsters fail. Now what it does is it gives the party three options. You can either just start combat normal, you can attempt an ambush, or you can attempt to evade. Let's just go through what these are. Start combat is pretty straightforward. You can just start the combat normally if you want to. You can attempt an ambush, which will call for a stealth check from everybody in the party, and provided that that stealth check still beats the monster's perception, they start with the surprise condition at the fight, so you essentially get a free round. And then you can also do the same set of rolls and attempt to evade. If you hit this button and roll successfully, then the skip button that showed up before will become available again. That's where that skip button comes into play. But let's just say we want to attempt an ambush. Request stealth check from everybody in the party versus monster passive perception. All must succeed. So here's the kicker here. If any one of your party members fails the stealth check against the monster's passive perception, you all don't get the ambush condition. The fight just starts normally. But let's see what happens. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that passes. So then you pass. So you just know that you start the encounter with the surprise condition, and it even prints it out right here. And at this point, the party does see this printout. All of these pass-fail buttons, all this stuff, like the party sees, the party did not see this, so only the Dungeon Master actually knows what the monster is until they decide to reveal it. Generally speaking, if the party passes their passive perception, the DM will describe, or at least show a picture of what they're encountering. The only thing left to really mention that affects these things is anything that involves disadvantage or advantage. So things like invisibility or lighting conditions or weather conditions that cause visibility issues. Anything like that causes advantage or disadvantage for either stealth or perception. Advantage adds a +5 in our system to your passive, whether that's perception or stealth, and disadvantage subtracts 5 from your passive. And that's for both the party members and the monsters. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing this. You got to keep in mind the lighting and weather conditions and anything else like that would affect it. So just make sure you're double checking all of that. Now the caveat here is I showed you what it looked like when I win. The interesting part here is that the monsters can win too. So if in that process that I just showed you, we don't perceive the monsters, like the monster's passive stealth beats the entire party's passive perception, and the monster wins its stealth roll against the party's passive perception, then the party starts the combat with the surprise condition. So this can work for you as much as it can work against you. After that, you just run the combat, and then, like I said, once the combat is completed, assuming that you don't die, you just hit the rewards button, and then you can move forward or backwards as need be. There are other versions of combat that you will encounter that have their own special conditions, such as the arena, which has waves that you have to beat, and you can only rest at certain points. All of those rules are listed out in the arena channel. Pretty straightforward. Has a similar setup, aside from the stealth thing, because you're in an arena, so you can't stealth at the beginning of combat. The other situation is hordes. Hordes are a little bit unique at the moment because they actually roll a random map. You have a map that you have to play on, and it sets certain conditions and environmental factors in there. That's another one that has waves, and you can't really stealth into that one either. Eventually, that map rolling system will get implemented into the normal dynamic encounters. So yeah, in terms of traversing outside of the city, going through wild and encounter channels, these are the basics that you would really need to know and understand, both as a party leader and as a party member. And yeah, there's a few other rules that pertain to encounters and such. Those are in the rules channel. You can easily look those up. There shouldn't be too much more outside of that. But that's all I have for you today. So you all enjoy yourselves, and as always, if you have any questions or concerns, you can ask them in the questions channel. And yeah, if you have any other suggestions or want to see other things explained in a tutorial video, feel free to request that in there as well. And if all else fails, I will see you in the server, and happy hunting.